Hello and welcome to the Dentrepreneur Show. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Dentrepreneur. I am Dr. D. Todd Russell, and with me today is someone who is not in the dental space, but his background, his culture, his personality couldn't be better for what we're talking about when it comes to valuation of your practice, determining how and when to get out, and kind of the guts that are needed behind it. With me today is Babe Kwasniak. Babe, welcome to my show.
Dr. Russell, my brother, it is an honor and a privilege, and you know I mean that.
I do. We go back, probably approaching 20 years now, maybe at least 15. And every time I'm with you, it is an uplifting experience. And to have you on my show, not only to edify you, but we're going to talk about your accomplishments, which are like you've done more in a couple of decades of being an adult than most people do in a lifetime, babe. And some of the work you're doing is now God's work, but it's every time I'm with you, man, whether it's a beer on the golf course, just passing by, happen to see each other at, Home Depot. It's always walk away going, man, I'm so glad that guy's in my life. But
thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome, brother. So what my listeners don't know about you is that Babe is let's see, we'll start with, he is a graduate of West Point. He is a decorated military veteran. He is currently the Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army in the state of Ohio. He's received multiple awards while he was in the Army: Army Achievement Medal, Army Commendation Medal, a Service Medal, Army Global War on Terrorism Medal. So his military career is fantastic. Then he parlays that into following in his father's footsteps and becoming a high school basketball coach, where not only does he follow in his father's footsteps by becoming the coach, but he goes on to win state championships, and not just one, not just two, not just three, but he winds up winning and getting to the championship level almost every year that he does it. Now he's actually backed himself down, and he's at a middle school as a head basketball coach, but he's converted himself into a motivational speaker, a leadership coach. And I touched on God's work. He's now actually helping a lot with veterans tackling challenges, PTSD, transition, suicidal tendencies, and things like that. Babe, I could keep going on and on. I didn't even mention the fact that you outkicked your coverage in marrying Laura, who's also a West Point grad. And what's interesting about Babe is at his house, he's got these, hero walls, and he's got this picture of his graduating class at West Point. And he conveniently points out, you see, that's me. Like down there in that bottom row, like kind of in the middle. And then there's my wife. She's in the top in the middle. So what you don't know is in this picture, you are standing by rank of how you graduated in the class. And so my wife, center middle, number one, me, bottom middle, almost number last. So, babe, yeah, I'll kick your coverage.
I was more like General Patton, my wife was a little more like General MacArthur. Todd, we all have our avenues, right, where we get to. But yeah.
So anyhow, welcome to the show, babe. I'll stop talking about you. I'll let you fill in some of the blanks there for me.
Yeah. Well, first off, you said I was a grade school coach. That is not accurate. I'm the high school coach, actually.
Sorry.
That's okay. I was the head coach for Villa Angelo St. Joseph High School in Cleveland, Ohio for 10 years. And which was my alma mater where I went. And in 2020, right before COVID hit, we parted ways, and I took a year off, but now I coach at Cornerstone Christian Academy, where we just finished our second year. Just been a huge blessing in my life. So on the side, I'm a high school basketball coach, but as you said, I'm the Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army. And a lot of people, Doc, ask, well, what is that? And what we do is we're the conduit between the Army and the civilian sector. So I have two major pillars that I work on. Number one is recruiting. And I don't know if you saw our brand new commercial. We went back to Be All You Can Be, which I thought was really cool. It kind of gives me chills because it's such an important time. Obviously, what's going on politically and what's going on, it's a crazy time in our world. And, we talk about Russia, we talk about China. So we need the right folks defending us, and we need the right folks regardless of race, sex, gender, creed. We need, because when you're talking about winning your country's wars, it doesn't matter to fill any type of quota. It matters that we get the best. And we have since 1776. Then the second part of my job, as you alluded to, is our Soldier for Life program. And maybe we'll get into this later. Maybe this is another podcast, but but I'm a PTSD survivor. I am a suicide survivor. In 2015, I tried to take my own life, and that's a whole nother story. But so I work with a lot of soldiers and a lot of veterans with suicidal ideations, as well as just, explaining to people that not every single person that served in the military has PTSD or has dealt with these things. A lot of my issues actually didn't stem from survivor's guilt, that I thought I didn't do enough. And you'll find out, and we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, we get in our team building. And I'll just start with this, Doc, like post-traumatic stress syndrome. A lot of people think it's killing someone or watch someone be killed. The number one component for post-traumatic stress syndrome with the United States Army veteran is guilt, is the fact that they let their teammate down. And this number blows people away. 59% of veterans who died by suicide, they never went to a combat zone. They never deployed. And that number blows people away. And this epidemic is almost, it's a reflection of society, right? I mean, and again, we can go on that in a whole nother podcast, but those are my two major pillars for the United States Army. And,
as my podcast grows, Babe, I think that's a great topic, because my colleagues also have a large percentage, more than the general population, of suicide. There's something about the dentist.
You know what? I think I saw that somewhere, because you inflict pain, right?
Well, we think we're helping, but you somehow internally, yes. Well, think about it. Somebody the first time someone meets you, I hate you. That's the first thing they say.
That was what I thought when I met you, to be honest.
Right. Thanks. Friend. But no, seriously, right away, you're all of a sudden, we're defending ourselves. And for some people that can take you down. Now, if you can put on those blinders and focus on, what you are doing, you're actually helping people, whether it's, people come in pain. When people are in pain and they see you, the first thing they say is, I'm so glad to see you. And then you get them out of pain, and now you've done them a service. And so I think, we could definitely have a conversation about that. And I got somebody else, maybe we could do it, you, me, and this other friend of mine who's on the mental health side. I think it'd be a great conversation. But today we're here to talk about which is sort of the opening of my podcast. And you're one of the first dozen or so guests that I'm having on here. I've seen and struggled with, I shouldn't say struggled with, I've seen so many of my colleagues are entering into this. What do I do at the end of my career? How do I get out? My company that I founded, is buying practices and trying to grow itself through acquisitions. But I'm coming across these doctors who are handcuffed. They think their practice used to be worth X, it's now worth Y, and they can't understand. And systems are antiquated, culture is antiquated. And so this podcast is bringing people like you on to talk about just that: leadership, motivation, systems, culture, and building it up so that you can, all those little things don't show up on a profit and loss. But ultimately they do at the bottom line number, which then turns into a bigger valuation. So that's why I've got you on. Hey, let's take a quick tangent here, because I like to do that. Everybody on my show has heard me say this. But hey, Babe, I believe if I am holding this and you are not, do you not owe me a beer?
Captain Quaz owes you a beer. Yeah, you know the way that works, brother. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
So why don't you take a quick second and explain what these are and what they really mean. I have another one, by the way. This is from 2016 when the Cleveland Monsters won the Calder Cup.
Oh, that's right. Oh,
so if you were a member of the team and I was the doc, we all got one of these, and we're together forever the rest of our lives. If you don't have it with you, you're buying. So
those are military challenge coins. So I think the way they started using them is that you got something for back in World War II, a confirmed kill or something of that nature. And now they've morphed into our units will have their military challenge coin. Normally the commander and the sergeant major will have those. So when a soldier does something, it could be we've given them out for someone taking someone out of a burning car or just having an outstanding score on a physical fitness test, to whatever the leaders deem may be necessary. And it's kind of morphed into this pretty just awesome tradition. Yeah. And so what happens is, in your unit, if you have one of your coins and you go out for a drink and you have yours and your buddy doesn't, then he's got to buy you a drink.
Yeah.
So
I think a lot of people, cool.
Somewhere in my office, I don't know how to turn this around because I'm not that tech savvy, but I have, where I do my Pentagon calls from my wall, I have all my I have all my coins, and those tell such a story, because my two favorite ones are from two of my former bosses that I worked for. One was General Dempsey, who was the chairman of USA Basketball. He was the 18th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for President Obama. And then the other one was General Brown, who was Colonel Brown at the time, who is now the CEO for the Army Alumni Association. So he's basically over the entire, and it's pretty cool for me because, I started with those guys.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a great tradition. I love it, and I waited until we got recording here in the intro part to throw this out in your face. So, because I know, and then like I said, in 2016, I got the other one, completely, a little different, but the same. These, and obviously a tip of the cap to what you guys do with these coins. That here a pro sports team wins a championship, and so that they always have the bind. They're bound together the rest of their lives from what happened that year. But now the rest of their lives, they'll come across each other. And, there obviously many of them, there's only one or two left on the team now, will go and they'll connect again. And to have that bond is so unique, which is a great segue into, let's talk about people and culture, Babe. So, I'm talking to docs who, many times the doc is put on a pedestal. It's a solo practitioner, and I'll just paint this picture. Solo practitioner, doing very well. And in our space, $1 million revenue is considered great for a solo practitioner. And, it's a staff. It's 5, 7 people, maybe 10 people working for this doc. And they all admire the doc. But a lot of times the doc is, the head cook and chief bottle washer. And so they're all everything. And so the culture is that person. I am a big proponent of letting the others in the organization be part of and dictate that culture and how it goes. I think the Army and your experiences as a basketball coach, you do that with your players. You did that with your players. You still do today.
Have to empower them. Yeah.
They become part of the culture of that locker room, right? I see it time and time again with your own social media posts, how you come across the boys that played for you 15 years ago. You still follow, you still keep in touch with, and every one of them, to a man, says is what you kept in that living room of your locker room. Same thing in dentistry. We have this team, and while the leader is clearly the coach or the doc, what is your take on that?
Well, first of all, if you doctors think you know everything, and I can say that because I'm married to one, so you have that issue too. But first off, let me say, Todd, I'm so proud of what you're doing, because
thanks, babe.
I listened to some of the snippets and everything, and I loved your one you did on mentorship. And I thought about when you talked about how you had one mentor that was great to his patients, but treated his staff like crud, and how the other one was the opposite. Yeah, flipped. And I worked for 2 generals like that, and I was like, wow. I didn't realize at the time until you brought that up. So it applies to every part of life. I know in my own career, like I've been in the military, and I've been a head coach for a high school basketball team, pretty successful one. I mean, sales was the one thing. I was in medical sales. I was in cancer diagnostics and molecular testing. It's probably the one thing that I was God gifted me, right? And I'm a name dropper, as you know. And a lot of times I say it's not what you know, it's not who you know, it's who knows you, right? Everybody knows the president. When the president knows you, now we're talking about a different relationship. And so when we're talking about all these things, when we're talking about what I'm most passionate about, which is leadership, what we're talking about is a contact sport. Leadership is a contact sport. So you can't lead from an ivory tower. So the good ones understand that we've got to get down. We were talking about what those military challenge points is touching our people. And guess what, Todd? Contact sports are not for everybody. I know you're a hockey guy, brother. I know. You're ready to put the pads on right now and play. But the reality is so many folks have this backwards. You talked about the results. They want the results, and they're skipping the steps, okay? Because the results are a direct reflection of your behaviors. So if I get the term motivational speaking, a motivational speaker, motivation is a myth, brother. Like you cannot be a champion and only do it on the days that you feel like doing it. That's a myth. That's a bunch of hogwash. We believe in discipline. We believe in, hey, we're going to do it no matter what. All right. I'm going to get up and make my bed, which is what we do in the military. And why do we do that? Well, number one, because we want to have an astute attention to detail. Number two is that's our order of accomplishment, right? If we take care of these results, okay, the behaviors, then the mission, which is the goal, the behaviors will result in that. That will take care of the results. But the behaviors are a direct reflection of your culture. And that's exactly what you talked about, right? This is how we do things around here. And on a high school basketball team as a coach, if I'm the guy dictating our culture, Todd, we're not going to be very good. But if I can empower my folks to understand, and for us, it'll be as simple as tuck your shirt in. Now, we're not tucking our shirt in because, that's the rule or wear a tie. It's because that is our standard of behavior. And I think it's because I'm a military guy. I really don't believe a lot in rules, right? I graduated from West Point barely, and a lot of things in life. I pinch myself like how did I even end up getting here? Like this doesn't. But I think a lot of times it's other people's standards for me will never supersede the standards I have for myself.
And that's why you got where you did, babe. Don't undersell yourself on that, okay? Because you don't give up. You stick to those standards. You always want to achieve. And so I always say, I am not the brightest bulb on the scoreboard. And I teach my children this, but nobody can outwork me.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. And you just got to be careful. I think I am very passionate, as are you. But I was told this a long time ago by a pretty famous basketball coach named Mike Krzyzewski from Duke. He said,
West Point guy.
Yeah, West Point guy. I was working his camp one year, and he's like, your passion, a lot of it's going to come off. A lot of people are going to think it's fake. They're going to think, no way can this dude be this way all the time. And you and I have a common friend, my best friend Jason Waybrick, and a lot of my buddies think that when they meet the guy, they're like, "There's no way this guy is like this all the time." And I like that. No, yeah, that's a superpower. Like he is so positive, 100% of his life. And anyway, the reason I bring that up is because you got to be careful that passion doesn't turn into emotion, right? Because passion can heat your house, can cook your food, but when it turns into emotion, which it did in my life, it can literally burn your house down. And again, that's another podcast. But I talked about culture, Todd, and who dictates the culture is the leader. The leader dictates the culture. So, okay, if you want results, it starts with the leader. Who is in charge? The leader dictates the culture. The culture drives the behaviors that we're performing every day. And then that is what produces the results. We have it backwards in society. It's gotten so bad where I was like, oh, we want this result and we're skipping these steps. And what are we talking about? What do we talk about when we talk about leadership? I mean, for me, and that's why I was so pumped to hear your podcast and hear you talk about mentorship, because we're talking about why would someone want to follow me, right? So whether that's going into combat, like why do I know this person's going to be behind me? Because the worst thing I could do is advocate my authority. The worst thing I could do is, this is what General Russell said we're doing, so that's why we're doing it. No, Captain Kwasniak's got to turn to his guy and say, hey, Specialist Gibbons, we're doing this because X, Y, and Z. And what people don't realize is when soldiers, when we bring a soldier home in a body bag and an American flag, or in a casket and American flag, we don't fight for Republicans. We don't fight for Democrats. We don't fight for an ideal, and we don't fight for that flag. We fight for that person to our left and to our right. And in order to do that, the key word is trust, right? So how do we get someone to trust us? And what we learn is the best leaders don't produce followers; they produce more leaders. And therefore, it's I call it Todd my hit by the bus theory. Like if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, our culture should be so strong that really who we are should be okay when you're not there, right? And it's funny you bring that up. I mean, of course, no names and any of this, but I left my dentistry office because the doc was great, but the person at the front desk, I had something going on with the Pentagon where I couldn't move my appointment. I think the doctor completely understood, but the front desk person was, good service beats good food, brother, right? And I was like, okay, well, I'll just go somewhere else. And it had nothing to do with the form of care, what they were doing with my teeth or whatever. It was right. It was the front desk, and your culture is everything. All those little things, add up and make a big difference. And that would be my thing for your viewers is you can't lead from an ivory tower. Leadership is a contact sport, and there's so much sales in leadership. There really is. Yeah. There's so much that ability. And to me, I've seen great communicators that are not great leaders. I've never seen a great leader who could not communicate.
Right.
It's absolutely pivotal in leadership.
And in that ivory tower, and there's two things here, Babe, that you keep touching on or that you've hit on. First of all, it's this culture concept. And if you were hit by a bus, right? And this actually came up on one of my other guests and that's why the strategy, this exit planning now, thinking about how it's going to end. What if you bought this practice at 35, we're trying to get to 60, all of a sudden you're 50 and you get hit by a bus and you're gone. Okay.
Yeah.
The culture does survive. So does your spouse, significant other, family, right? If it's all in place, if the exit strategy is in place, if the culture and the systems are good, your family is going to be rewarded, albeit the great loss of you, but they're going to be rewarded. If it is haphazard, if it is, flying by the seat of your pants, all that kind of stuff, then it's a disaster for whoever's left behind, and then you go to the ivory tower thing. I say this time and time again. And again, a couple others, and that's what I love about this, is when you talk to people like yourself, you're not a dentist. You never, outside of your dentist experience on the customer service side, you haven't been there, but boots on the ground, getting in the weeds, getting dirty. Every business is a little bit different. And if you are the owner and you're now trying to sell to somebody else who's not there, ever been there, isn't like you, they don't know that history, and that history dictates a lot. But the common theme of your history and my history is our culture. My culture might be different than yours, but it's still the idea that that's what great. And then what I'm also finding out, and you just hit this too, is that the cultures are actually the same in the end. There's still that same thing. There's that willingness to want to win. There's that willingness to fail. I saw this at the airport. I saw a sign, and it's I think it's like life, pass it on, or it's some kind of an ad. And what really struck me, it was about Abraham Lincoln, right? How many times did Abraham Lincoln run for public office? Failure, right?
Yeah, 13, wasn't it? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then when does he win? Becomes the president of the United States and one of the greatest presidents in history, the man of the times, really. So anyhow, it's just, culture is something you create, but there's common denominators within it. And you can draw on people like yourself and what you've done as a West Point grad, spending time in the military and combat zones, and now coaching and mentoring young people. So
let me say too, Doc, people talk I talk about this quite often. And what I found is it's much harder to protect your culture than it is to build it. Would you agree with that? Like you think about it, you look at high performing culture, like, you and I are both sports guys, right? You take someone like, you look at the dynasties, right? Like when COVID came, you had the Bulls, okay? And you look at that was egos that destroyed that. Or you look at the Yankees, or you look at what happened with Brady and Belichick. It's always egos, okay? It's always somebody, whether it's jealousy, whether it's money. I mean, it's so much harder to protect your culture, I think, than it is to build it, right? Because what happens is, and I'll take this from a coach's perspective, and you can do the same thing, right, in your business. What happens is when you win, what do? You relax, right? You relax. So you're doing well, so you say, okay. And then we say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You know what I think is the only thing dumber than that? When you do something that made you successful and you stop doing
and
that.
You stop doing it. Right. Do what got you there. Right. I always say that. Yeah. Do what got you there before. Right?
It blows my mind, that there's so many, there's so many folks. And of course I work with young people a lot. And I'm like, man, that just, right. That's insane. I mean, and understanding that protecting your culture is hard, right? It's not easy, because the best advice I was ever given, back when I was a lieutenant, is I had a situation. I don't want to go into it because I'm not proud of it. It was something I did. It was a pretty egregious mistake. Could have cost me my career, actually. And it was a colonel that I was working for who was actually a Florida grad. I don't know why I remember this. And he didn't particularly like West Pointers, so he already wasn't fond of me to begin with. But I did something pretty stupid, and again, could have cost me my career. And he brought me to his office, maybe stand at attention in 95-degree weather at Fort Benning. I think he did that on purpose probably for 2 hours. And he finally said, Lieutenant Kwasniak, He goes, basically told me how dumb I was. And then after that said, I want you to hear me because you're one of the smartest lieutenants I've ever had. He said, soldiers don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And there's so much truth in that. It's so simple, Todd, right? And it's so simple. So, think of your folks working for you, right? And, you talked about people don't know your business, right? But leadership is the people business. And everybody can do that, and everybody can work on that. Leadership is it can be worked on constantly and consistently. My wife's a dermatologist. There's not a day that goes by where when I tell her something about the epidermis, she looks at me like I'm a complete idiot, right? And then there's days where she'll tell me something about coaching where I'm like, right. She'll tell me something about coaching. Yeah, and same thing. Yeah. But what's amazing to me, and I promise her, I've never mentioned anything, names or whatever, but I will say this. She's a West Point graduate. I'm proud of her. She was first in her class in med school, so I love bragging about her. But she says the best leader she ever worked for in her life was her boss in her dermatology office. She said she worships the man. Like she gets emotional. And I'm thinking to myself, like, where my wife has been and the things she's done in life, and think about that. Yeah. So the impact he has had on her, and that's a senior doctor, a lot of the mentorship you're talking about. It's like, if she could be anybody in the world, she would want to be him. And they're different religions. They're different. I mean, he's male, she's not, like, and it
doesn't matter though.
Just and we're talking about inspiring people, right? And so many times people think that's rah-rah, and it's not.
No, there's different kind of leaders, right? Right. There's leaders by example, which is fine. The quiet, silent type that everybody still gets in behind. There is the rah-rah person. There's the person who says, look, I've got all these books. I've got this book of experience. Follow me, and you do. There's all sorts of leaders. Pick and choose who you are. I think the best leaders, in my opinion, are the ones who empowered those, I don't want to say below them, but their direct reports, who empower them to be part of it. Because what are you doing? When you give people the ability to have autonomy, to make some of their own decisions. I tell my teams all the time, look, if it's not in the office manual, right? If it's not in the operations manual, if it's not in, who's in front of you? Babe Kwasniak is in front of you, and you don't know how to answer his question. Do what's best to make him happy. And then we'll go back, and then your wife will know this, morbidity, mortality conferences. We'll go back and we'll talk about the hows and why of it dying, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. He was there. Here's what you did. It wasn't, we hadn't trained you on it, or we didn't have an answer for that. You went ahead and you made an executive decision. You got the problem solved. You made Babe very happy. Okay, now let's talk about that. Do we need to write that? Is that not in our manual? So we need to put that there for the future. And if so, the way you did it, does that fit our core values and our culture? Do we want to tweak that a little bit? But what you're doing is you're not making that person wrong, right? You're thanking them for solving the problem.
Catching him doing something right.
Yeah. And even if you didn't like how they did it, they solved the problem for who was most important at that time, and that was the customer, right? Now you come back and you figure it all out. You sit down, and then you let them. They become part of it. They become part of that culture. They become part of the system and the systems, and it gets memorialized. And now the next time they come across something like that, they have more confidence to solve the problem.
And Doc, that's such a great point. And two, from a coach, people need to understand that everybody's role is not going to be the same, right? So, like, if you're on a basketball team, like, okay, we have one basketball, so one guy's going to get to shoot it, but someone has to pass it. I use the term hockey assist all the time because we don't get an assist for it in basketball, right. But it's making the right play. So, in your practice, how do we correlate that? Well, I don't know. Have you talked to the person cleaning your office? Have you talked to your janitorial service? I mean, because everybody has a role. And to me, what the great ones do is they make sure those folks understand that their role is vital to our culture, which leads to our behaviors, which produces the results.
Right.
So, like we don't just like, hey, this is beneath me, this talking to this person. In the Army, we call that trooping the line. We call that walking down the line and trooping and saying, hey, and it could be just something as easy as, like, do you know your people? Do you know their families? Do you know their history? Listen, I mean, ask yourself, your folks working for you, if they didn't get paid, would they be doing it? I mean, the answer is probably no, right? I mean, I've been blessed where I'm in a position where my life where, I'm doing things because I love it, right? I'm literally living my dream. A lot of folks, like, they're doing this because to support their family. So we have to understand, where someone else is coming from. And that's, that's such empathy is such an important piece that we don't really talk about much in leadership, as is humility. And I learned that the hard way, because when you don't humble yourself, it tends to happen for you. And again, I learned that the hard way in terms of leadership. Most importantly for me that I've learned, Doc, that I would like to share with your listeners is, so much early in my career, I wanted to be right. Hey man, I'm a West Point graduate. Like, I'm in the Veterans Hall of Fame, but you listen to this Grant, John Glenn, Neil Armstrong.
I know this, right?
Yeah,
I know how to do this, right?
Yeah, man. And I think about, like, when I first met you, right? Like back probably in 2008, whatever, like I was most definitely that way. Now it's let's get it right. And you look at, like, our political climate today, like, so many people are worried about, just being right. Oh, I'm right, you're wrong. Let's just get it right. Whether it comes to, the stupid, gun laws, or like whether it comes to, the race wars, or just, everything in our society, and we talk about social media, and I appreciate you complimenting me, but it's hard, man. Like, because there's people that come at me, brother. There's people that, man, you can't put rain back in the cloud. And for all the good that I hear from people like you, I have trolls, man. Like, I've had people make a fake Twitter account of me and of all the things, and saying, like, that all of these things in my career, and catching me, and, like, they're saying I'm lying. It's brutal. And let me just say this:
why do you put energy? Why do people put energy into that, babe?
Amazing, right? It's unbelievable.
That does no good.
There's people who know me too. I know most of them are. That's like, but anyway, they're not even worth talking about.
More energy making someone wrong than you do in making an effort to go forward.
And my pastor Kyle Reynolds, says to me at Friends Church, he says, people who try to make a point rarely make a difference, but people whose purpose is to make a difference rarely need to make a point. And so just, you serve others, man. Like, you serve others, and if you view leadership as that, if you view that as not, hey, I'm in charge, I have to bark at people. If you view it as, hey, as you said, at my front desk, hey, Hallie, how do I make your job easier? What can I do to make this better for you?
Right.
Like, what can I do? What can I do to make it better? And maybe it's going to be something, hey, well, let me scroll through my Facebook. Well, no, you probably can't do that. But at least now we're having the dialogue, right? And anytime that conflict, I firmly believe in that. You know me, I meet things head on, and that a lot of conflict is wonderful
in the right context, right? It doesn't have to be conflict. Doesn't have to be defined as knives and guns. It's you have a vision, an opinion, and I have one over here, and we need to work this out. And in the end, maybe we agree to disagree. That's okay too, but it can actually propel an organization and a group of people forward. Conflict can be as much as deciding when to have the Christmas party.
Yeah.
Right? Two people disagree on the date. All right, we got to figure this out. Right? That's conflict.
That's like every office too. That's like every office's argument.
Yeah, right. That's why.
Or what goes into it, right? Chocolate fountain, or yeah.
Well, ultimately, babe, all of this conversation today, which tell you, the problem with podcasting, what I'm discovering for me personally is I'm listening to you, and like I said, tangents. It's what happens to me. My head, there's like 17 questions from 10 minutes ago. I still have. I haven't even gotten there yet. I can't. There's not enough time. I try to keep my shows relatively short, some wow moments, some bang content, and then we'll do it again later. You have touched on, we didn't even get to talk about systems today. All we did was talk about the culture. But I want to come back around to where we started. Culture, systems. These are the things that add value to your practice. Ultimately, I am consulting, strategizing, trying to teach, motivate doctors to prepare for leaving their practice. Your patients are going to go someplace else if they don't stay with the new person. You want to be prepared for that new person to have the most seamless transition. You want to get the biggest value out of the practice at the time that you move on. But moving on also doesn't mean selling it and walking off into the sunset and playing golf every day. Okay. It could be that you could sell off pieces of it. There's different ways. And that's where I feel like I have all this strength now. Like you were talking, we've definitely become humble. It's interesting as you get older with experience, you start to become, your ego doesn't grow. And I say, this is another thing that I say all the time. There's a difference between confidence and cockiness.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
At 35,
Arrogance.
you're cocky. I talked to this dentist not too long ago. I'm part of a different group. It's a guy that's pulling together a bunch of practices to take them to market, if you will. And there was one guy he wanted me to talk to, a young guy, about 35, got building the newer building, all this other stuff. And, he sat there like this, like, and I'm thinking, dude, you are one cocky SOB, and that is going to come kick you in the, like you've never been kicked before. Confidence comes about by shedding that cockiness, not being afraid to fail. That's where confidence comes in. Hey, babe, knock me down. Go ahead.
Can I jump in on that, Doc? I love that point. Listen, I went to West Point because I got a letter because I got recruited for them for basketball. And
oh yeah, by the way, just small sidebar here. Babe played D1 at West Point. Okay, go ahead. Basketball.
And I'll never forget this. My guidance counselor, I brought her the letter, and she looked at it and she said, "You have no chance. Like, you won't get in there." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to West Point."
Right.
I went to medical sales after my time in the Army, and I remember being in an interview, and I was with a doctor and a sales director. Todd, for 2 hours, they're like, "Okay, you have no medical experience, you have no sales experience." And I'm like, okay, my answer is not going to change after 2 hours. That was a job I wanted. So that was a job I ended up taking, and I used that job to pay my wife's way through med school. And then, my whole life, hey, you're a small white guy playing Division I basketball. I wasn't very smart, made it through West Point. I had a chip on my shoulder my entire life. And it drove me, like we talked about the fire. It was the passion, to prove people wrong. It also got to a very dangerous place where I call it the invisible enemy, where I was constantly telling myself, and you're always moving in the direction of your thoughts, that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't a good enough man. I wasn't a good enough father. I wasn't a good enough soldier. I wasn't a good enough. And that's what led me, to fight anxiety and depression, along with some extenuating circumstances. What's my point? Number one, don't let other people define your success. Especially, nobody knows your practice like you do. So, and I remember, like, when I won my third state championship, my dad was sitting there looking at me. We were fifth in the country, and he's like, "Are you not happy?" It's like, no, I don't feel anything. And that was like you can't let other people dictate your success. And then also understand, like, when I was interviewing for that medical sales job, I didn't need somebody to have confidence in me. I needed somebody to have confidence enough in themselves to hire me. I knew I could do the job, and I was on stage every year. Like, right. I've never had a sales member that I didn't need them to believe in me. And you got to understand that you're not going to be for everybody, right? And let me make my most important point where I'm trying to go with this is I spent so much of my life, Todd, trying to prove people wrong. And now I'm at a point in my life where the people who love and believe in me, people like my wife, Jason, yourself, who I know believe in me, I try to prove them right. And that has made such a difference in my mental health. I mean, I just cannot. I just cannot. So, we say, hey, how can this apply to my office? Because we talked about it. Leadership is the business of people, man. We're talking about people. And you know what, Todd, we're never going to have an app for that, brother. We're never going to be able to. Leadership is the one thing. It's never going to change, right? And you look at, if anything, it's harder now than ever. We can have relationships with people out in California that are miles and miles wide, but they're an inch deep. And, we talk about the get off my lawn in the good old days. And I feel like you and I are sympactical that way, right? Because we cannot see each other for a couple of weeks and there's going to be a bear hug. And listen, man, that's a contact sport, and understand that, like, while everybody might not be that way, if you're up at the top of the ladder, that's why it's lonely up there, right?
Yep.
That's why it's lonely up there. So if you're not good at it, you better figure it out, right? You better figure it out, because I mean, you're only as good. You know this. You're only as good as your team, right? Yep. I get the best players on the bus. I got the best players. I'm gonna have the best team. I don't care if it goes to a hockey team. I don't go if the greatest team in the world, the United States Army, or if it goes into Dr. Russell's dental practice. Right. The end.
Wow. Babe, we could go on for like 4 more hours, and I can't take up your time like that. And so obviously I'm going to have you back, bud, if you don't mind. I mean,
I would love to.
Let's kind of wrap up with a couple of things here. First of all, thank you for being on my show, number one. My show, DentrepreneurLLC.com. You can find me on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. But more importantly, babe, we've got you're doing some of God's work with suicide prevention, and also your speaker series. So how can people get a hold of you for all of that? Because listen, if someone's looking to hire someone for a motivational speaker series, this is the guy. Get this guy.
That.
He's worth every second of it. Okay. So go ahead. How can people get a hold of you?
You can go to diligentplans.com, www.diligentplans. That's my, that's the Chris Yeagle's my boss. That's my agent who I speak out of. And now that the season's over, I fill up pretty quickly. So, but I love talking to organizations, talk a ton about mental health. I mean, it's something I don't enjoy talking about, but obviously it's something very needed, these days. And then I'm pretty active, as you know, on social media. It's at Babe Kwasniak on Twitter and Instagram. Facebook's getting to be a murky place in terms of politically and all that. So I'm trying to make a decision over Easter of maybe cutting back a lot on there. But I am on LinkedIn. Twitter at Babe Kwasniak and Instagram at Babe Kwasniak as well. BABEKWAS.
Awesome. Well, my friend, thank you so much for being on my show today. I look forward to having you back. And there's plenty of topics for us to get through. So we'll cycle back in the coming months, and I will probably be seeing you in a couple of weekends at somebody's big birthday party coming.
That's right. We'll be there, brother. Can't wait.
All right. Thanks, babe.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us. Please follow or subscribe to this show on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. If you would like further information or to meet with me one-on-one and discuss your practice, please feel free to contact me through my website, DentrepreneurLLC.com. Many more exciting guests and topics are headed your way.